So, first, I want to begin by simply saying thank you. Thank you for taking the time, making the effort, and showing up for the person in your life that is currently going through divorce. You have no idea how much your friendship might mean to them right now. Now, you can't fix this for them as much as you might want to, but that doesn't mean that you're helpless. There is so much that you can do to support them as they work to rebuild their lives. So, before I get into some of the practical and hands on advice, I'm first going to talk about some of the thoughts and feelings that this might bring up in you. And I know that this might seem a little bit strange. After all, we're talking about their divorce, not yours, right? But the truth of this is that none of this lives in a vacuum. And we need to be so aware of our own feelings and our own responses when we are trying to help somebody else. So, the first thing is to be really careful about your assumptions. Don't assume that no matter how close you were to the couple, that you really understand what their marriage was like. Don't assume that you know the motivations for the divorce or who initiated the divorce or what went into and led to this point. Also, don't assume how your friend is responding to the divorce. It may be that this is relief for them. Maybe this is something that they've been wanting for a long time and have finally worked up the courage to do this. Maybe this is extremely traumatic for them because it was very sudden and very unwanted. Maybe it's a mixture of the two. Maybe it's bittersweet. Maybe they don't know how they feel. And what's interesting is that those of us that have been through divorce actually are sometimes the worst at this because we tend to think that, well, everybody else's divorce is like what I experienced, but that's not the case. Every situation is going to be unique. And so instead of operating with assumptions, just keep your mind open, be curious, give them space, and be willing to listen. Next, be aware of what emotions this brings up in you. Maybe you experienced your parents' divorce as a child, and even the thought of it kind of brings up that abandonment that you had as a kid, or maybe the fear that you had over being left. Or maybe it's not so much your childhood, maybe seeing this relationship that you thought was solid, that you thought was strong, dissolve makes you worry about your own marriage. And so you're kind of projecting your fears onto them. And I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have your own feelings around this. Of course you are. All I'm asking is that you're aware of where some of those emotions might be coming from and try your best not to project those onto your friend right now. And then the final piece that deals with your own thoughts, before I get to the more practical advice, is to watch your judgment. And this would be things like, well, I would never divorce. Me and my spouse will always talk things out and work through things. Divorce is quitting, or divorce is a sin, or you are destroying your children by making this decision. So let's look at each of those. If you're telling them that divorce should never be an option, well, you don't know the situation that they were in. Perhaps they weren't given a choice. Perhaps their partner decided unilaterally that the marriage was over. And so for them to hear that it shouldn't be an option when they weren't given a choice, it's just an added blow. If you're telling them that divorce is a sin, well, if they are religious, then trust me, that is something that they have wrestled with themselves. And that's not something for you to talk about with them necessarily. That's more a conversation for them to have with their pastor or with God. And then by telling them that they're destroying their children, believe me, they are already feeling so much guilt and fear around this for their kids. And if they were the ones making the decision to end the marriage, trust them. They did not make that decision lightly. They weighed the pros and cons, and they realized that leaving the marriage created a better life for their kids than staying. And I think one thing that's good to keep in mind as you're supporting them through this process and you see them act certain ways, say certain things, is remember that they are grieving. And I don't think we often recognize that enough as we should. Divorce is a kind of death. It is a major, major loss and reorganization of everything in their lives. They are not only grieving the marriage that they had, but they're also grieving the imagined future that they thought that they would have. And think about the grace that we extend to those who are going through the death of a loved one. Extend that same grace to them right now. Okay, enough of that. Now, time for the more practical stuff. I think sometimes we believe that we need to show up for somebody in a very certain way. And then we worry that if we can't be that kind of friend to them, that then we're of no benefit. And so we tend to kind of keep our distance. What I want you to do, though, is show up as the kind of friend that you are. So maybe you are the one that can sit with them when they're absolutely sobbing and you can handle those uncomfortable emotions, and that's no problem. Awesome. They need that person. Be that person. Or maybe that's not you. Maybe you are not comfortable with tears. Maybe you're not comfortable with that much vulnerability. Maybe you're the person, though, that can get things done. Maybe you're that practical friend that can help them navigate through the attorney stuff or can help them rent their new apartment and get it set up. That's amazing. They need that person too. Or maybe you're the friend that can get them out on the town and help them reconnect with their playful side. That's amazing. They need that too. Or maybe you're the more adventurous one that will get them out on a hike that they would never do on their own, or even get them to go skydiving, whatever it is. That person is needed as well. So don't try to be the kind of friend that doesn't fit you. You, be authentic, but show up as you are, because I promise you, they're going to need that. Follow their lead when it comes to talk about the ex. I know that it can be so easy to be like, oh, they're such a scumbag. I never liked them. You're so much better off without them. But recognize that their feelings are going to be complicated. After all, no matter how much of a scumbag this person is from your perspective, this was somebody that they chose. This was somebody that they loved. This was somebody that they spent their life with. This was somebody that may be the parent of their children. And right now, they're probably having a lot of complicated, mixed up emotions of hating them on the one hand, loving them on the other, missing them, wanting them out, just a whole mess of things. So be careful to sort of follow their lead with that and not be too dogmatic about your views of the ex. And as they're talking about their ex or the divorce, be careful to sort of find the balance between validating their experiences and enabling their experiences. So here's what I mean by that. You don't want to say things like, you'll bounce back, or you're totally better off without them, because they come across as extremely dismissive. It just feels too pat, like, oh, this was nothing. Don't worry about it. You'll be okay. On the other hand, you don't want to enable them. So enabling them would be allowing them to spend countless days and weeks and months talking about what was done to them over and over and over again. Now, part of that's natural. Part of that's going to be just them processing. But if you allow them to stay in that space for too long, well, you're really enabling kind of that victim mindset that they don't want to be in. And I know you don't want them to be there either. So really the best place for you to be is where you're validating their experiences, but you're also encouraging them to look forward and to move on. And so I see this as sort of kicking ass with kindness. It's saying, yes, this sucks. This is horrible. I know you're in pain right now. And I also know who you are. I know your strength. I know your capabilities. And I believe that you will be okay again. One of the things that divorce can destroy is social connections because so much of that is often built around the couple. And one of the ways that you can show up for them is to look for opportunities to provide them with some social connection. Depending upon their situation, they may need family. They may be missing that sense of connection. Perhaps it was their in-laws and that's where they went for every holiday and now, well, that's gone. Or maybe it's the fact that the kids are now spending more time with the ex and so now like they're facing Christmas without their children. So if they're needing a sense of family and that's something that you can offer, invite them in. Now, if you were part of the couple friends that they had, be aware that they might be feeling a bit like a third wheel right now. Now, what I want you to do is still extend those invitations. Don't assume that they don't want to attend. And then if they do choose to join you, just be sensitive to the fact that they may feel kind of like the odd one out if everybody else is in a couple. And to that end, also look for opportunities where you can do things with them without the partners around so that they don't have to have that odd one out sort of feeling. One of the things that happens with divorce is you kind of lose your sense of self because marriage does become part of our identity. And so after divorce, we have to reconnect with who we were before that person so that we can believe that we can be that way again. And if your friendship predates their relationship, you really have a special role in helping them reconnect with their true self, the self that they had before and without their ex. And even if your friendship is newer, you still can play a role here. Your confidence takes a beating during divorce, and you also feel completely powerless as you're going through the whole thing. So look for opportunities to help rebuild their confidence or help empower them. It can be as small as something like going out to get nails done because it makes you feel a little bit better about how you look. It could be signing up for a race together and accomplishing that goal. There's so many ways that you can help them find themselves again and believe in themselves again. Be alert to signs that your friend is in crisis. I think it's really important, especially in the beginning, to ask them questions about how well they're sleeping and how well they're eating. Those are often indications about kind of their overall functioning. And if they're not doing well on those things, especially after the first few weeks, strongly suggest that they see a medical professional. Also be aware of the hardest times of day. Often that's going to be evenings or night times, any time that the kids are with the ex, or unstructured sort of times. And so extend a hand, reach out at those moments. That can really, really go a long way to helping them. Offer practical support. When you're going through divorce, everything feels completely overwhelming. I remember looking at just a normal weekend to-do list and just being frozen because I couldn't figure out what I needed to do next. And so offer to help with things as simple as going to the grocery store, picking up the dry cleaning, ferrying the kids around. Things like that are really going to help them. Especially be on the lookout for things that are easy for you, but carry an emotional gut punch for them right now. I can give you an example from my own life. In my situation, I won't get into the whole story, but my, still husband's vehicle was at the house that I was no longer at, and the car needed to be started every few days. And the first time I went over and did it, this is going to make me tear up, and it knocked me down for a day because it was so hard going back into that house, sitting in his car, and it feeling just empty. And after seeing the impact that it had on me, a coworker, a friend said, "Let me do that for you." And so for the next several months, he took over that job for me. All he had to do was just open up a garage door, turn on a car, sit in it for a few minutes. For him, it was nothing. That gift for me was everything. Look for ways that you can mark the end of their marriage. We have all these rituals with the beginning of a relationship, but so often the end just kind of fizzles or like falls off a cliff and we don't mark it with anything. And so many people find some sort of ritual around the end healing, but when you're in the middle of all of that, you don't often think of it on your own. Now, if you're going to propose something, watch the timing of it. They have to be sort of in that right mental space. They sort of have to accept the end or be close to accepting the end before they're willing to mark it. And then also make sure that you're suggesting something that fits for them. You can mark the end of a marriage with everything from a crystal ceremony to a divorce party blowout in Vegas. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just make sure that it's something that fits your friend and their personality and their needs. Try to have patience with them as they're retelling their story and seem sort of stuck on their divorce. I know that it can be frustrating. I know you're sick and tired of hearing about it sometimes, but they're trying to process it. They're trying to come to acceptance. And depending upon the nature of their marriage, they also may be trying to put some pieces together and figure things out. And so try to be patient and listen, but at the same time, help them move the narrative forward. Remind them that there is a life outside of and beyond this. And then finally, when it comes to your friends starting to get into new relationships, first, don't push them into dating or into having a fling before they are ready. It's just not going to lead to anything good. Also, be compassionate to how they approach these new relationships. Sometimes it might seem like they're moving too fast, like they're jumping all in. And they probably are. That's extremely common after divorce. And there's a few things going on there. One, it's just a nice distraction from all of the other garbage. Also, well, it feels good to be wanted and desired again after going through all of that and after your confidence has taken a beating. And then there's another part that I don't think many people think about, but if you've been married for a long time, you know how to be married. You don't know how to date. And so early relationships, you approach them kind of like a marriage because that's what you know, that's your comfort zone. And so it's going to take them a little bit of time to sort of figure all of that out. And it's also good to be aware of another extremely common pattern. A lot of times they will dive headfirst into a new relationship and be completely infatuated, tell you, oh my goodness, this person is the one. I mean, they will literally sound like a 16-year-old. And then that relationship will end. And that's when your friend may become completely devastated. A lot of times, some of that grief from the divorce actually kind of gets postponed until the end of that first post-divorce relationship. Even though it wasn't a long-term or serious one, that's the one where they kind of can fall off a cliff. So just be aware of that pattern. So again, I just want to thank you for being a friend, for caring about them, for showing up. It means more than you will ever